It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the Princeton Women's Ice Hockey head coach, Cara Morey. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about your coaching career and how you got started?
Yeah, I actually, I think I always knew that I wanted to teach. And usually when you're a teacher, you get to do some coaching. And I always like to, help coach young girls when I was in college, actually. Like I would coach youth teams and stuff. So I think I always knew I wanted to do something along those lines, but I didn't really understand that coaching was a career for women. So most of the coaches when I was playing, like there wasn't a lot of like full-time paid salaries for coaches, even at the college level. It was, it was a tough go. So um I played for quite a bit after graduating, and then I took time off. I was a stay-at-home mom for 8 years, and kind of focused on my husband's career. And then when it was time, and it was time for me to look for a job, I started exploring the idea of coaching in college. And I called a few people, and actually a lot of people were like, "No, it's not a good profession for moms, and you shouldn't do it." And there was a lot of that, but something was drawing me to it. So, to tell you the truth, I applied as a second assistant at Princeton. I ended up getting the job with, I had a little bit of experience because I coached at Thayer Academy, and taught there when I first graduated. But then 8 years of being a stay-at-home mom, I just kind of volunteered my time in Pittsburgh with Robert Morris a little bit. And then in Arizona, I helped coach the Lady Coyotes, which was just a U19 club team. So I didn't have a ton of experience in the college world, but I got the chance at Princeton, and that was in 2011. And then I've kind of been here ever since. And I just kind of worked my way through second assistant to first assistant to associate head, and then to head coach eventually.
That's amazing. Can you talk about, of course, winning the first ESAS tournament?
The ECACs, yeah,
Yeah,
it was quite an accomplishment. I actually had no idea that Princeton had never won the ECAC championship ever before. I had no idea because our program's been around since 1975. But I think the ECAC probably formed in the mid 80s. So I actually didn't know until the night before we were going into the championship game that Princeton had never actually even played in that game before. So that game was probably one of the best and strangest and like just most amazing game I've been a part of, whether it was as a player or a coach or a spectator, because um, the game was just a big kind of cultural shift. It was an energy shift. It was hockey, but it was more about kind of the emotions going on at the time. So in the championship game, we were actually down 2-0 to Cornell in the first 3 minutes, and Cornell was ranked number one in the country. And we ended up just clawing back and coming back, and we used the energy of the building and the energy of the band and all the fans, and just came back and won that game in overtime 3-2. So it was amazing. In the moment, I don't think I really took it in and appreciated how great it was. But like when I look back on it and I have our players talk about it, or I see videos from it or pictures of it, I realize like it was one of the most special moments of my hockey career.
can you talk about your first year as the head coach in 2017 and 2018?
Yeah, so I had already been at Princeton for, I think, 6 years before I took over as the head coach. So you can kind of foresee how the program's going to look based on kind of recruiting and who's where in the roster. And that year we knew it was going to be a bit challenging. We had great players and a great team, but we only had like 16 skaters at one point. The roster was so small. because we knew we had large classes coming before. We kind of graduated a big class before that and hadn't replaced everyone. So we knew it was going to be a bit of a challenge. And it certainly was a challenge for me going from kind of an assistant or associate head into the head role and trying to make the program my own, but not confuse the girls, because I had been with them their whole careers, but now I'm in a different role. So I was trying to put my own name on it and kind of make the culture the way I wanted it, and yet not be too abrupt. So they're like, what's going on? Why is this happening? So it was an interesting season. We ended up having only 4 defenders from December on, and we actually went into a 3-game series into overtime with Cornell again, ironically, with 4D, and it was a great series. We didn't win that. I think we ended up being put out in the quarterfinals of the ECACs that year, but it was definitely an amazing year, but a real learning experience on kind of how to switch from going from the assistant coach role into the head position.
Can you talk about, of course, your time at Team Canada?
Yeah, as a coach or
yes, as a
player? I mean, the national program is incredible. So I spent some time in the program as a player when I was young, and you don't really understand what goes on the other end of it when you're a player. You just kind of show up and you're there, you work when you're supposed to work, you eat, you sleep, and you do what they tell you. But you don't understand everything that goes into it behind the scenes. So Team Canada, when I get to go coach with them, it's probably one of the most challenging and rewarding experiences. And I really grow as a coach. So I think I've been coaching with them for 7 or 8 years now. And every year I learn something new. So it's incredibly disciplined. There's a lot of details that go into everything, but you get to go and learn from the most amazing coaches from around the country. They'll bring in guest coaches, from the NHL and stuff to go over systems, but also working with some of the most talented female players in the world really it's just an incredible opportunity. So I've got to go to a lot of really cool places. I've got to go to Vienna and Germany and Prague. So I've got to see a lot of the world because of it, but it's just really working with the players and working with the staff. It's an incredibly rewarding experience.
Can you talk about your collegiate career at Brown as a dual athlete in field hockey and hockey?
Yeah. So I went to Brown for ice hockey, but I had always played field hockey throughout high school, and my high school team was really strong. We actually won the Ontario Championships 3 years in a row. And I loved field hockey, but I knew my sport was hockey. And after going through a full year and a half of just hockey, really, I really missed field hockey. And actually one of my teammates, one of the best hockey players to ever play, her name's Cara Morey.She, she decided she wanted to play field hockey. So I went over with her, and it was one of the best decisions I made, because sometimes hockey is such a long season. We start in October, we go all the way through the middle of March, and having something to refocus on kind of early on in that late summer, early fall is really neat. And then in the spring, I would go back to field hockey for spring training. And it was neat to have kind of the different group of friends, different type of training. You go from skating all the time to then running. And the game is similar, but very different. So I loved it, but there was nothing else I wanted to do outside of playing sports. So I'm the type of person that if I could just play sports and then, I went to school, obviously, do my schoolwork and play sports every day, I'd be really happy. So for me, playing the 2 different sports was incredible, because it was I was almost always competing, and I kind of got rid of that preseason grind a little bit and got to play games instead. So it was awesome. The people I met, right now we have a group of 7 of my best college friends that get together all the time. And through COVID, we've had all kinds of Zooms and everything. And it's all the players I live with, which was 3 field hockey players. There's 2 hockey players and 2 softball girls. So it's really cool to kind of have all these different friends in all these different communities and compete in 2 sports.
As a coach now, do you recommend your players to be a dual athlete and play a sport during their off season of hockey?
I mean, I wish they could a lot more often. It's a lot harder now. So the hockey season back then started a little later. So you could finish your fall season and then start. I remember actually like, it was maybe my junior or senior year, one of them. My last field hockey game was on the same day as my first ice hockey game of the season. So we were playing Yale in field hockey. This is one of my favorite memories of being a dual sport athlete, but we were playing Yale. And I think we ended up winning 3-2 or 4-2, but I know I scored a goal in that game. I ran off our field was on the roof of a building at Brown, which is really unusual, but I ran down and I got into the rink wearing my full skirt and shin guards and, my full field hockey uniform, and they had already warmed up. So they were about to drop the puck, and I ran in and got my gear on, played that game. We were playing Minnesota, and we ended up going into overtime, and I assisted the game-winning goal that we beat Minnesota to beat them 3-2. But I didn't have anything to eat for 8 hours, but it was literally off the field of one sport onto the ice, play the next sport. I think they gave me like Coca-Cola on the bench to keep having some calories. Back then it was a little bit different, but it was the most amazing day of my life to pull off 2 victories against 2 strong teams and feel like you played a role in both of them. So the seasons were different. Like I said, one ended and the next one started, which was convenient. Now there's like 6 to 8 weeks of overlap, depending on how. So it's really difficult to be a winter athlete and do a second sport. So you can do fall and spring a lot, but winter is hard to combine with any others. I wish they could do it more often, because I think cross training is critical. And I think that multi-sport athletes make the best hockey players anyway, but it's really hard these days.
That's an amazing story. Can you talk about your time in the NWL for the Montreal Wings?
Yep. So the NWHL is a different league now than it was then. The NWHL now is one of our professional women's leagues that's mostly out of the US. And there's, back then, the NWHL was still considered professional. None of us got paid, but it was mostly all in Canada. And I went and played for the Montreal Wing Stars because I was doing a master's degree at McGill University. So I went there, I played with the Wing Stars. That was another amazing year of my life, because all the players on my team were French Canadian, and they all spoke French first. There was only there was 2 English players, me and my roommate, and then there was 1 player that could speak both languages, but everybody else was heavily French. Our coach spoke French. All our practices were in French. So it was amazing being in a different culture. I loved it. I loved that year. The hockey was incredible. I loved going to school back in my home country, although I felt like I was in Europe half the time. So I think playing there, it just really opened my eyes to how big the world is and how diverse North America really can be. I think it was, one of the best years of my life.
What have you accomplished at Princeton as the head coach?
My biggest accomplishment is really just when they come back, the players come back later and they have great jobs, or they're still playing, or, they invite you to their weddings. And some of my players now that I had coached a while ago are starting to have babies even. So I think the biggest accomplishment for me is watching them grow into strong female leaders. Like, most of our players are just killing it out in, the corporate world or in law or doctors. And they're incredible women. And I love, actually, when I see a lot of them starting to coach now themselves, like young girls or even young boys, and giving back to the game. So I think, there's obviously accomplishments in winning Ivy championships or winning ECAC championships. But for me, the most rewarding part is watching them after they graduate and come back and seeing the amazing things they're doing in life, and feeling like maybe I had a part in helping them grow into that woman that they've become.
That's amazing. What is the recruitment process like for hockey whenever it comes to recruiting and official visits?
So the recruiting process for women's hockey is a little bit strange right now. So it used to be one of those sports that was very early recruiting. Before they made the rule change in the NCAA, they were committing, 7th grade girls and 8th grade girls, which is absurd, right? Like, it's just too young. So the NCAA just over a year ago, passed a rule that we cannot speak or communicate with anyone until June 15th of their sophomore year. So really heading into junior year is when we can talk. And so that's just coming up now because a lot of us had already filled our rosters. And so we kind of had a dead couple of years where we weren't really recruiting or talking to anybody because we had to wait till this age group came. And that's where we're at right now, is the current sophomore class. So on June 15, we can basically start communicating with them. So if anybody reaches out, before they've hit that June 15th, like sometimes I'll get voicemails or emails and they're asking questions, but I'm actually not allowed to respond. So we can't answer the phone. We can't, send an email back answering their questions until June 15th. So now on June 15th of this year, it's tricky because it's COVID. So we haven't been allowed to recruit. It's been a dead period. We haven't been allowed to go watch. So we've gotten some video, but now most youth hockey has been shut down, especially in Canada. They haven't played all year. So we haven't got a chance to see them. We haven't got a chance to go out in person and see a lot of the top US players. So it's going to be an interesting spring. But generally we would be out on the road, we'd be watching, we'd be going to a lot of, high school events, club events, looking at players, gathering like the players we like. And then you start to build a relationship with them, starting June 15th. And like, I want to know who they are outside of hockey, because I can tell what kind of a hockey player they are, but I don't know if they're going to fit in our program. So I want to know, like what are they like? What are, obviously grades matter for us at Princeton. It's a really academic institution and you have to meet a pretty high standard academically in order to even come play for us. But more than that is like, what are they like as a person? And what motivates them? Kind of, are they selfless? Do they have a team first attitude? Those kind of questions come into play because I want to make sure that it's the right type of people that are in our program. So we'll start that around June 15. And then I believe it's like right in September now for juniors and seniors can come on official visits. It'll be interesting because COVID canceled all the official visits from last year. So in the fall, hoping the vaccine and everything goes well, we'll be able to invite some of the top juniors to come look at campus. And then, usually at the same level that they're deciding, we're competing for top players, but we're also vetting them to see which ones are going to make a big impact and be the right people for our program.
Can you talk about, of course, what happens on the official visit for women's hockey?
Yeah. So, you can come into campus for 48 hours and we like to do it so we make sure they can go to some classes because school is the reason they're coming, to all these colleges. So, we try to set them up with some classes. They'll stay in the dorms with some of our players so they can understand the dorm life. They'll go eat in the dining halls. We also have eating clubs on Princeton, so they'll go see the eating clubs. We usually try to get them in a class or two that they're interested in. And then they'll see us practice. They'll see us compete. They'll stay and watch a game. They'll see everything that goes into those kind of game day things. And then, we send them back home and hope they really enjoyed their time at Princeton. And it's really about, can they see themselves becoming a member of our program? Can they see themselves doing this on the day-to-day for 4 years? Is it something they think that, they'd find a lot of value in? And if that's the case and we get a match, then, we go through the process of the admissions process. So for Princeton, we don't have formal offers or NLIs. We basically, we tell admissions, these are the players we'd like, and then they have to go through the admission process and make sure that academically they're a good fit and they get vetted that way. And then usually it's fall of senior year or near December when they get their admissions letter. So it's a little bit of a longer process in the Ivy League. But I think it's worth it.
Can you talk about, of course, competing in the Ivy League as a coach, and who are some of the teams that you have played against?
Yeah, so the Ivy League has 8 schools in it. So the Ivy League is Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Brown, Dartmouth, Cornell, and then Columbia and Penn. But Columbia and Penn do not have ice hockey programs. So it's just the 6 of us competing. The interesting thing about playing in the Ivy League is that the Ivy League plays within the ECAC, which is the tournament you had just asked me about earlier. So there's 12 teams in our league. 6 of them are Ivy League teams, 6 are non-Ivy teams. And so it's the biggest and most competitive team in the league in the NCAA, because on any given year, except for COVID, where the Ivy League's been canceled, but outside of COVID, there's usually 5 teams in the top 10 in the nation that come out of our ECAC league. So winning the Ivy League title is a regular season. We don't have playoffs. We don't have a tournament. So every Ivy League game is very intense because you don't get a do-over. So your record after playing those 5 other Ivy teams, that determines who the Ivy champion is. And so it's really competitive. And then within that, we go on and play the other 6 teams to win the ECAC championship. So it's a pretty amazing league because you get a chance to win 2 championships and there's a tournament title. So there's a lot of hardware up for grabs, shall we say.
What advice would you give upcoming women's hockey players looking to play in college?
I would say make sure you play the game for the right reasons. Like you have to love the game in order to play in college, whether it be Division I, Division II, Division III. There's not really Division II, but Division I, Division III, even like club. Like it's a grind. But if you love the game and the game is your passion, then you will love every minute of it. If you're playing hockey as a means to an end, like you're using hockey to get into a school, I think you're going to be a little dissatisfied with the experience because it becomes more like a part-time job while you're at school. So if you love it and you love the grind and you love the work, then do it. But make sure you're playing for the right reasons and make sure you're having a lot of fun. And I would say still when they're up and coming, play a bunch of different sports so that you don't make hockey your entire life right now.
What advice would you give upcoming coaches looking to get into women's ice hockey?
Well, we need a lot more women in here coaching. We don't have enough women coaching. I think there's like maybe 8 to 10 head coaches in the whole country right now that are women. So my advice is do it with passion. Do it again for the right reasons. Do it because you want to give back. Being a coach is serving others. So it's like you want to motivate and inspire female leaders. Do it. And I would also say apply, because the biggest thing is that a lot of women don't think they're qualified and they'll look at their resume and don't think they have everything. So they won't apply for the jobs. Apply. Even if you think you're not qualified, apply, because it's like men will do it all the time. They'll see like 2 things on a application form. They're like, yeah, I can do this. But women often hold back. And I'd say get confidence. Come out here, do it. It's such a rewarding career.
That's wonderful advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media along with the Princeton Women's Ice Hockey Program?
So for social media, I'm on Instagram the most, I'd say. Instagram and Twitter is both at Canadian. And then I think we're called PWIH Tigers on Instagram and Princeton Hockey, maybe on Twitter. So we're on all those. I think we do have a Facebook page. It gets a little less love than the other platforms, but mostly you can find us on Instagram and Twitter.
Thank you again, Karen, for your interview, and best of luck in this upcoming season with the ice hockey.
Thank you.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Karen, for your interview, and best of luck.
All right. Have a great day.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.